Good morning, good morning. My name is Nontokozo Kwala, intombi yakamhlabeli nganaphela. There are new rules and limits proposed for petrol and diesel vehicle in South Africa, said the Business Tech on the 11th of July 2023. Transport Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga has called for incentive to reward those that use cleaner fuel as a measure to reduce air pollution, which affects human health and environment. Vehicle subsidies may be offered, for example, towards buyers of compressed natural gas (CNG) buses and electric and hydrogen run vehicle. Additional fare subsidies are known to attract more numbers of commuters from the use of private cars, said Chikunga. I don't know how many people in South Africa will be able to afford such type of vehicles. Addressing the 41st annual South African Transport Conference, she said the contribution of road transport to the public of South Africa greenhouse emission has increased to 95.7 in 2023. Road transport is said to be the highest polluter due to its overwhelming impact. There are almost 13 million vehicles on South African roads, of which are good vehicles. In environmental terms, it is documented that 2018 road transport alone was responsible for 91.2 of the South African greenhouse gas emission. Other modes such as aviation, maritime, and rail accounted for 5%, 2.2%, and 1.6% respectively, said the minister. The National Department of Transport is tasked with drafting policy and legislation which in turn must guide the planning and the building of resilient system to tackle global transport externalities. However, agreeing on policies that will enable internalization of social cost from GHG emission globally is not an easy task, with differences between the more developed and less developed countries. I agree fully. As the government, we may have to improve the design of incentive to reward those whose transport production and consumption activity result into positive externalities. Taxes and subsidies are here imposed so that private costs absorb society full cost and benefits accruing from transportation. Imposing taxes and subsidies, however, require a lot of data towards establishing the true cost. I also believe it requires a new infrastructure so that people who are unable to pay these fines or taxes are able to use public transport. She added, subsidies might also be used to influence consumers' choice to opt for more environmental friendly transport modes. Policies may be put in place to subsidize capital expenditure as well as operational expenditure related to public passenger transport. Modal subsidies for public transport, buses, railway, and taxi may be offered. I want to see what is going to be an option for the taxi industry because it's one industry that is not agile in terms of flexible in terms of government legislation. It should be noted that these ends we have already embarked on a process of developing and implementing a public transport subsidy whose benefit must accrue most importantly to the consumer of the public transport. These actions are intended to stimulate an increase of use of less intrusive transport mode when given subsidies. In addition, fuel economy standards could be set to capture the mileage travel per unit of fuel consumed. Hey, I can just imagine moving from Johannesburg going to my village, Umhlabialingana, how much will that be cost in terms of their fuel cost economic standard. She also suggested regulations on emission standard which may be set to impose a limit on the amount of exhaust that the vehicle happens to be given off in its tailpipe. Fuel quality standard may be instituted to limit pollution elements in fuel in a fuel type, lead in petrol and sulfur in diesel. The minister call comes as international community prepares to commemorate the Mandela Day, which is calling for focus on dismantling poverty and inequalities by acting against climate change and creating a resilient food environment. Uh, this is an article that is giving us an indication that government is moving towards incentivizing people who are going to move to the new type of electronics and etc. in terms of eradicating the gas emission. We understand that, but now the challenge is that the infrastructure does not allow us to even use that kind of public transport that they are proposing. So we hope they also look at that in terms of affordability, in terms of the geographic space, landscape that we're in terms of the available infrastructure, and the state of readiness of our communities who are commuting from Tembisa to their workplace, just for an example, whether can they have access to transport from where they are, Ekasi to the CBT to work and back. Thank you very much for listening.